Hello, everybody. I hope all of y'all are having a good day today. In Acts, on the day of Pentecost, whenever the disciples received the Holy Spirit, it's written that the Spirit came down, divided up into tongues of fire. All right? And remember, God is love, and God's love is like an all-consuming fire. All right? So you look at this, it says it came down in tongues of fire, and each one received this tongue of fire. All right? This tongue that with the Holy Spirit comes the divine language, to where you can speak the spiritual language, the divine utterance, the logos. That's when you're baptized in fire, love. All right? If you remember the two witnesses, whenever someone would try to kill them, fire would come out of their mouth. All right? You've heard the expression, kill them with love. All right? That's what the two witnesses do. Anytime a religious spirit comes up to you, they speak the language of love, the tongues of fire, and it consumes the people. It destroys them. All right? It kills that religious spirit. So anybody coming at you, you have this amazing weapon of love, this language that is fire that consumes them, and they cannot stand against you. It's even written. Jesus said that I'll give you words that no man can stand against. All right? And if you are saved by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony, that's two witnesses, and your testimony is the logos. All right? You have that power to speak fire. From time to time, I have people contact me, send me emails and stuff like that, and they'll say, Billy, I never hear you preach about the spirit language. You need to tell people about the power of speaking in tongues, and how whenever you speak in tongues and you're praying in tongues, the devil don't know what you're praying about, so he won't know how to interfere, And I've had people also tell me that because I didn't speak in tongues when I became born again, that my conversion is false, that it's not real. Even though I say I let my fruit do the talking, the tongues for me, and you see a life that has been transformed. I mean, going on 13 years now, and I'm still just as on fire today as I was the night that it happened to me, June 14th of 2012. Theirs as well, I went and got baptized. I come up out of the water, and I was going, shut up, like that. And then after church services was over, I went back to my life, just like nothing, had ever changed, except on Sunday mornings, we all get together, and everybody does the same, shut up, Jesus, I'll put up the Bible verse here, but he even said, don't be like the heathens. And in the English, they said use vain repetitions, all right, in your prayer. But when you look at the word in Greek that the writers used there, that word for vain repetitions means to sound like you stutter. Somebody goes, that's somebody that stutters. Jesus said, don't do that. The heathens do that. All right? And if you'll do your research, and if you'll look back way before the time of Jesus, there was an Egyptian priest. I believe his name was Winnemon. I did a video on this probably 11 years ago, and anyways, I believe his name was Winnemon. And he was going before the Pharaoh to ask for gold, to have funding to build this special temple that he wanted. And he was very, very nervous to go before the Pharaoh. And whenever he got before the Pharaoh, it's like he just went, and almost like he had an anxiety attack, and he was doing that speaking in tongues, the gibberish. And the Pharaoh freaked out. He was like, oh my goodness, give him what he needs. He is speaking the language of the gods. He's speaking the golden tongue. You see, the Egyptians believed that they found certain mummies that have like gold wrapped tongues, that their tongues are wrapped in gold, and that they did that because whenever they were in the underworld, they would have to speak to the gods. And the gods had a special language, and it was the golden tongue. So they would paint their tongues and put these like gold flake paper on their tongues so that whenever they got there, they could speak this special language. So this priest, he got what he wanted, and people started practicing that because it is a way of stress relief. Even the Hindus do it, all right? They'll speak this tongue, all right? And so Jesus said, don't do that. You know, you're not doing anything. That's what the heathens do. Jesus said that these signs will follow them, those who believe in me. You know, they'll be able to drink poison, it won't mess with them. They'll be able to get bit by snakes, it won't hurt them. And they'll speak in a new tongue, right? Now, I did videos on the poison and the snakes, and I'll do another one later on it, but today we're talking about tongues, all right? That word for new there is kain, and that means something that has never been heard before. And Jesus was speaking this language of love, this spiritual language. Remember, he spoke to the Pharisees and stuff in parables, all right? He spoke a spiritual language that most people couldn't understand. I've had people tell me the same thing. They'll say, Billy, I know a lot of people come across your videos and they can't understand a word you're saying, but I understand you totally. I know exactly what you're saying. You know, Paul talked about that whenever there's somebody there speaking in tongues, you have to have an interpreter. And if you don't have an interpreter, don't do it, you know? There's also a time where Paul asked for prayer that he be given divine utterance, logos, to explain the mysteries to some people. He was going somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but he asked him, pray that God will give me this divine tongue, utterance. All right, that I'll be able to explain this to them to where they'll fully understand the mystery of the gospel. All right? There was a time when Paul met some men that had never heard about the Holy Spirit, and whenever he laid hands on them, and that means whenever he used everything at his disposal, his golden tongue, all right, speaking the divine utterance, and using the Old Testament scriptures and everything that he could use, that's what laying on hands is, to get those guys to believe. And when they believed, they received the Holy Spirit and they went away speaking in tongues and prophesying. All right? Well, the speaking in tongues and prophesying is like the same word, really, whenever you look at it in context. And that word for prophesying, so everybody always thinks that means predicting the future and stuff, but it's a two-sided word. It also means to teach by divine faculty, meaning that you can speak this language, divine utterance, all right? And it doesn't come from you, it comes from God, all right? That's what that word prophesying means. I've heard people say, I was raised in a Pentecostal church, and, you know, since I was in a baby carriage and I was dancing and singing, and whenever I turned 6 years old, I got baptized, I come out of the water, speaking in tongues and prophesying, you know? And I was like, well, what'd you say? And I don't know, I was speaking in tongues. There was this lady on YouTube back in the day, I don't know if she's still there or not, but she was always speaking in tongues and things. And one time she got to going, and I mean, she was really, really going, and she had a bunch of chihuahuas, and you know, those dogs are kind of nervous looking anyway. And I remember them chihuahuas started howling and going nuts, and she was like, yeah, you know, and she was showing her faces, man, them chihuahuas were looking into the camera like, somebody please come get us, this lady is nuts, you know. But she was like, yeah. And then before you knew it, there was people in the comment section going, I know what you said, sister. Contact me privately and I'll tell you what you said. And then a few hours later, she'll come back and she'll do a video on this lady's interpretation of what I said in the tongue, because you got to have an interpreter, right? Well, whenever you look at that word that Paul used for, you have to have an interpreter. the same word that Paul used there in the Greek is the same word or same meaning as the word that was used in Hebrew whenever there was those two men that had a dream, and they asked Joseph, they said, "Are you an interpreter of dreams?" And Joseph's like, "Yeah." Well, that word in Hebrew means to explain fully. All right? And the word in Greek that Paul used means to explain fully. All right? And the other day, whenever Lynn and I were speaking before the congregation, it dawned on me that I'm speaking in tongues and Lynn is my interpreter, literally and spiritually, because what she does after every time we do a sermon and we finish, people will always come to us and say, "Billy, that was really, really awesome." I said, "Man, you speak about some really, really deep stuff, and we're so thankful for Lynn because she explains it to us in our language in a way that we can understand it." See, she interprets what I'm saying, and she breaks it down into a language that they can wrap their head around. She fully explains it. That's what an interpreter does. You know, and you have all these doctrines built on speaking in tongues, and people accusing people that, you know, you don't have the Spirit because you didn't speak in tongues. But if you are born again and Christ is alive in you, whenever you're teaching before people, you are speaking in tongues. And most people can't understand you. The people that are of the Spirit, they do understand you. But for those out there, they need somebody to break it down to them so that they can understand it and grasp it fully. I hope that made sense for you guys, and if you've ever been accused of not having the Spirit, or if you've ever been made to feel lowly and beneath people because you don't speak the special prayer language that everybody else does, I hope that helped you understand and it give you something to, you know, okay, I'll hold my head up now because this is what I do is what God fully intended. That's the language of love, all right? God is love, and whenever you speak his language, most of this world don't understand the language of love. As a matter of fact, the world hates it. I love you all. God bless.